You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Devin Gharibian-Saki, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Devin, and welcome to this that will be the 29th episode of The Only Constant. I'm super happy to have you on the show today and be looking forward to it as we've been, talking for years on automation and technology. And finally, I get around to having you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome being here, Lasse. I'm already excited. Not even started yet.
No, but let's see if we can make you, a little bit less excited and a little bit nervous about my terrible questions, right? No, but Devin, you work with automation, SAP automation at Redwood Software, right? Primarily SAP, but it's also other things you do. But what client discussions have been the most unnerving since the emergence of generative AI a couple of years ago? So what have really been something that annoyed you and made you feel uncomfortable?
um, I think generally it's not unnerving when I speak to customers. I think there is a pattern every time there is a new hype cycle on any new technology. I think, and that's kind of, if there is anything to be annoyed about, that's kind of my take on it, because it's not even customers, it's the ecosystem that kind of, whenever there is a new trend, people expect you to come out with stuff and talk about stuff, and it needs to be saving the planet again because it's a new fantastic technology. And you just need to have a point of view on stuff very immediately because you're in the mix and you're in software and in technology. And that's, I think, the thing that I found most unnerving. What just happened again with Gen AI as the next iteration of the buzz, if you will. But it's not. It's less so in customer conversations. Customer is actually, those customers that I deal with are actually very grounded. They're curious. They're
Mm.
asking if you have a point of view on that, and I do have a point of view. Um, but it's not necessarily the customers that come with that stuff. It's actually the ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, but when we started talking, it was all maybe RPA was slightly moving down the hype cycle a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The first time we started talking years ago, uh, and I just think that Redwood is much more suited to the RPA discussion because it's an automation tool that way. But is it now also a Gen AI tool?
Look, I think if you put it very simply, what Redwood does is orchestrate and automate very complex processes, right? And in that fashion, it complements and augments Gen AI, if you will. As an example, if we want to talk about a specific example, a lot of the data plumbing that you have to do is something we do for our customers today. So just make
Mm,
sure that the data is streamlined, that the data pipelines are really operational and like work autonomously. That's one key ingredient that we do. But also, as you build out AI models and you want to make sure that the data pipelines to feed those models are working, that's the role we can play. So I think that's kind of how it fits to my current world, if you will. Um, and of course, if I map it to what you said, I've been operating in the SAP or ERP space for a very long time, and what I do find is that Gen AI will be very applicable to optimize each individual task that a person has to perform. Like if I'm raising a purchase order, or if I'm looking for a certain invoice of one of my customers, there it will, for that single task, it will have an immediate impact in how easy it's going to be for me to do my job, or the machine can
mm.
do it for me. But like running a supply chain process end to end, that's too complex at this point, at least for Gen AI to take it on, or for AI to take it on, I think. So there's levels of complexity that I think it can manage or not manage today.
So what have been some of the more productive discussions you've had after Gen AI and with the clients as well? Have you had some discussions around Gen AI with your clients? You said
They are
before you
curious.
have a take on it. You said you have a take on it
Yeah.
before, right?
I mean, I have a take on it, on how we will embed it in our products and our strategy, and how we can help our customers from the Redwood perspective. And it's to some extent what I already shared with you. Customers are actually curious. They have certain use cases that they want us to implement Gen AI, and they're valid and they will be implemented over the next months. potentially even years, because some of them are very large and complex. There are specific examples, and I can give you one or two of those. But customers mostly are curious about ideas. So and this is a similar thing that happened to us in RPA years ago.
Mm,
It's a cool technology, but what am I going to do with it? I have no idea. So they
mm.
actually customers are mostly curious to collect ideas and to see, like, inspire their own thinking of how they can apply that idea or something similar in their day-to-day businesses. So that's kind of more the nature of the conversations I've been having, really.
So more pressure on from internally in Redwood than from clients who are just waiting to see what you'll come up with because they have no clue what they don't know what they should be demanding. Is that the problem?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, ultimately, we're in our space, we're experts, we're market leaders in these kinds of automations. So it's also on us, and it's our duty to actually come up with ideas. Of course, there are things that customers, that you might be in situations where customers have a very specific thing that they want you to do. But as we have a horizontal automation platform, we have to come up with the ideas too. So it's not a one-way street in that regard. And let me
But
give you an
also,
example, right?
mm,
So as an example, when you think of, and I'll use the supply chain process example that I mentioned earlier. So some of our customers in manufacturing, or those that produce goods, run their end-to-end production planning process with our technology, or orchestrate and automate it, which is spanning across 10, 15, 20 different major applications, has multiple thousand steps involved, when it's a very complex and long running process that can take, I don't know, 10, 12 hours to really run end to end.
mm,
And some examples for that would be, hey, can GenAI help me to identify how I can optimize the critical path of that process, so I can maybe squeeze the cycle time of it? Or
mm,
am I doing anything redundant in that process? Can I use the metadata of that process execution to do something more meaningful, or to optimize a process in one or the other shape? And that's a very valid use case that we are exploring right now. And
so
so
is
it's
that process mining or data mining you're using it for there, or?
It's a combination. It will be a combination of that, but it's also around the user experience of it, because you don't want to present the user a dashboard with some critical path analysis. That stuff exists, but it's more about facilitating or simplifying the process of actually implementing the change, which is,
Mm,
hey, can you find me the critical path? Yes. Now, can you please optimize that, what you
mm.
identified, and fairly quickly, rather than me having to go back and have five people code something, or change the process flow or something like that.
So you're using it. So you're tapping into the developers being the ones who have sort of embraced the technology quickest in generally in the market, and that's what you're tapping into in your software as well.
Correct. I mean, our users aren't necessarily developers, but they are business
But you're
analysts
using it
that
to develop. You're using
they're
the tool
using
to
it to
develop.
build a workflow or
Yeah,
to
yeah.
optimize. And I think that's also in the end, it's a sort of content, right? Building a
Mm.
workflow is building content for our platform, if you will.
But it's
Uh,
auto low code
yes.
developer agent stuff, right?
Correct. But there's always room to improve the user experience. And I think if you look at
Mm,
traditional low code tools, or if you look at even on RPA, it's used in the same. Gen AI will be used in a similar capacity. Instead of me using a low code tool to model database schemas or UIs, I will be more naturally interacting with that tool to tell it what I need it to look like, and then it's going to be a more easier UX in that regard. And I think that's how we also think about using Gen AI in our portfolio.
mm. Okay, cool. But aren't you so generally, I'd say, but this is a general capability across everything. It's not really specific on what you want to do. You're not saying that this particular part of that particular process will change with Gen AI. You're saying that any kind of process will just add a little bit more capability to the automation building phase, right? So that comes brings me to something I've said a lot over the last couple of years, is that we have a strategic deficit in the market that we are answering with engineering answers. So we don't know what to do, but we're doing what we can do, right?
Yeah.
And isn't this maybe the most unnerving part of Gen AI for you? That are you building things that will actually strategically fit both your tool and the client needs in the future? Or you're building something that's redundant and wasting a lot of energy on it.
Um,
It's
that's a good
interesting to ask
question.
you. Yeah,
It's an
because you
interesting
are you are you
question.
are a technology leader for a big automation company, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, good question to ask you.
No, it's a valid question. I think maybe the answer is maybe, because you don't know what you don't know. I think that we have some conviction in that there is value in simplifying the work that people have to do to deliver meaningful outcomes in our
Mm,
platform. All right, so that's a value that you will automatically deliver if you implement Gen AI in those scenarios that I just mentioned. So if I
mm,
make it easier for a business analyst to optimize a workflow, there is inherent value, and nobody will object to that. Will everybody be using it immediately? I don't know. Maybe not. So that, I think the adoption, I think the question is more around the degree of adoption it will actually hit, if you will, from a customer usage perspective. And I think that's what we're indexing on more. Like, where can we predict that there is definitely value? It's not building capability for the sake of capability, but rather helping our users to do something in a better way, if you will.
yeah, but it is a fun stage, right, to be at the same time, right? There's no you just said in the beginning that it's not really unnerving to talk to customers because they don't push for anything particular, and then you're still building things with it, right? So that's a special point. You're sort of building with the blind client, or what I don't know how you could say it, right? You don't know who they are, what they're gonna buy, right?
Yes and no. I think, as I said, I mean, that's a usual that's a you. So let me put it differently. That's a known terrain for us because we have a horizontal automation
Mm,
platform. We optimize financial close processes, we automate supply chain processes, we automate forecasting, replenishment, and logistics processes for our customers. There is patterns in those things,
mm,
and the pattern that we find is managing complexity, helping to reduce the cycle times of these processes, helping with the overhead that people have to deal with as they're optimizing these processes. So these are the patterns that span across any very complex business process. And that the same would apply to Gen AI. So when we can see that it can help optimizing some of these generic patterns that is applicable to any process, it will have inherent value. Of
mm,
course, if I look at forecast replenishment very specifically as an example, there might be things in the forecast and replenishment process that I could optimize with GenAI, but maybe in an individual step of that process. But that's rather something that I see the systems of records doing. So, and I see that with our partners from SAP. So they're now optimizing a certain business transaction in the ERP that makes the individual forecasting for an individual point of sale better with Gen
mm,
AI. And then we orchestrate that with our technology and we help optimize the overarching process flow. So, in
mm.
that regard, it is complementary to one another. And that's how I will also delineate what we should be delivering and what our the other software providers and the systems of record should be kind of delivering from a Gen AI perspective.
So okay, now the real tough question: how much can you save for your customers by helping them orchestrate them with GenAI? Are we talking 20% productivity tools like ChatGPT? And you've seen those numbers, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
I haven't met, we haven't yet delivered anything with GenAI. We've done some POCs and research spikes, so we haven't really
mm,
rolled it out to measure it. I think, of course, when we automate any process for our customers without GenAI today, there is inherent value, and it could
yeah, of
be
course.
huge. But I think GenAI will have to do some more analysis on that before I can come up with credible numbers. But the numbers will be along the same lines. As an example, let's debate this. Let's debate the financial
Mhm.
close. Let's assume we've already automated a close for one of our clients. It took 10 days to close. Now it takes 5 days to close. What if I find a way to optimize it so you can close in 4 days? How much is it worth
Mm,
for you, dear customer? So that needs
yeah,
to be explored, right? And
yeah,
I don't
exactly.
have a generic answer to it necessarily.
But I just think it's interesting actually because I'm just realizing this now actually as we speak that I think I spoke I think me and Alan we've spoken about it before, but Alan, who was on the last episode of the podcast, we spoke about how ERP has become sexy again. I would say using that word. Like I was trying to find another word, interesting again, but now
Yeah.
we use that word. But because it's transactions and it's efficiency and it's when everything is a commoditized service, it's about how efficient you are at handling that service. You know that gives you a value proposition in the market and gives you something to differentiate on top of, right? And I think that what you're touching upon here is actually exactly this efficiency. To see how can we make these transactions more efficient, faster. How can we use Gen AI to help us build faster transactions, analyze if we can do something faster. I think that's really interesting. It's not just a chatbot to talk to your customers, but it's actually something where you are trying to improve on something that's already been done out there. So this is you're not inventing the new business
No,
here, Devin.
we don't have to. Like, I think that's also a part of my, and we go back to the first part of our conversation. When people think of new technologies, they always want it to be the golden bullet and to solve world
Mm,
hunger for them. It's not always necessary to have that aspiration. Of course, everybody's looking for a golden bullet, and that's why where the hype comes from. Um, and I personally, have been a very pragmatic person since the beginnings of my career. So we as at Redwood, we are more focused on delivering tangible outcomes that you can do rather
mm.
soon without having to do a lot of fuzz around it. I think that's kind of one of our mantras, if you will, and hence, so one aspect is the fact that we have this generic automation capability and orchestration capability paired with this pragmatism, if you want to call it that, is the motivation for what we just discussed.
So you don't really buy into the whole new biz thing, or with Gen AI, that we have to see the best business case. Maybe this will change around the whole way. Maybe it's this. Do you think this is a new internet moment, or is this just a very incredible, very wide dispersed sub optimization of everything? So if you have to choose one?
I think there is an element of AI that we haven't understood yet, just like of the internet. Like, if you
Mm,
think back of the when internet was founded, very few people were able to imagine what the internet would look like 30 years later. And I think it's the
mm,
same for us today. I don't think we can even imagine today what AI will do for us in 20 years. Even the AI with its current technical capabilities might be unlocking stuff that we haven't really imagined yet, right? So
mm.
I wouldn't say it's limited in its capability. I think our imagination is limited today, and as AI evolves and our understanding and our ideas evolve, we will then unlock much more
Mm.
disruptive solutions and ideas and solution and products that come out of AI. I think we're just
But for now,
mentally not there yet.
we're sub optimizing efficiency gains
Yeah,
with it.
we're applying AI to the things we have understood well,
Mm.
and that's why we end up doing the things we are doing. Right?
Yeah, good answer. Um, so, Devin, you also said this about the closing process, right? So, is Gen AI going to help people up with this touchless close? Do you think it's cornerstone of Redwood automation proposition? So,
Yeah.
what are the concrete next steps to optimize that? Because I know this is something that you actually focus a lot about in Redwood.
Yeah. Yes and no. I think we already have built in some ML capabilities in our touchless close capabilities. So, as an
Mm.
example, if you
And also, what is the touchless close? Let's just explain that to
that's a
some
that's a
people.
good question. So, if you let's step back. If you think of any large organization, um, they take hundreds and hundreds of people to close their financial books every month or every quarter, and there are 10 thousands of activities involved in across hundreds of legal entities. And each legal entity has to produce their balance sheet, if you will, at the end of the month.
Hmm.
So what we basically aspire to do is make this as autonomous as possible. Of course, you can't make it fully autonomous because for regulatory reasons, you have to have people validate and approve stuff and check the numbers and confirm that they have approved it for auditing purposes. But a lot of the actual number plumbing and comparison of data you can fully automate. And that's what we're actually doing as part of delivering the touchless close for our customers. And
Hmm.
if you take that as a specific example, it goes back to what I was explaining before. You can use Gen AI specifically in that setting to understand where can I optimize my financial close process even more. We haven't delivered the Gen AI capability to do that, but can I have Gen AI help me in making sense of the metadata that I have in my closing process? Can I maybe optimize some of the dependencies across all of these 50,000 processes that have to occur to maybe shrink it from 5 days to 4 days without
Hmm.
having to make a lot of like stuff, but it's doing almost like a business analyst work business analyst kind of work for me. That's, I
So
think, how
so
we're looking at that.
Devin, okay, so here's the uncomfortable question. Why haven't you done this, earlier? This has been, possible to do some things. Microsoft
Mhm.
even built Copilot, last year.
Yeah.
So why haven't you done moved earlier? Is it lack of ideas? Was it the thing we just discussed? You don't know if the customers would want it, or was it a
Yeah, I think the
technological
customers were
deficit?
expecting much more fundamental or foundational stuff. I think this is the in my personal evaluation, this is the cherry on top of the cake.
Mm,
If you implement our finance solution as it is today, it drives already so much significant savings that it you don't need the Gen AI to make the business case stack up. It just makes it, it's an optimization of what already is a massive business case, if we will, for our clients. So that's why the investment has not been such a priority for us. Also, I think from a resourcing perspective, we haven't yet resourced our Gen AI team sufficiently. To be honest with you, that's something we're looking at for the second half of this year and the beginning of next year.
I think that's interesting, right? Because everyone else been, you know, talking Gen AI for a couple of years, right? And you've just been like, nah, let's wait and see. How come? I think that's how did
It's
you?
not wait and see. I think if you look at the shape of the problems that we're solving, most of these problems are very well managed with the capabilities that our platform has. Like it is not in our market that we operate in, Jenny. It's not a necessity to have AI to
Mm.
succeed. So that's kind of being it's a priority question, not anything else, if you will.
So, but we also at Basico where I work, we serve the CFO space. So I think we have a lot of the same client space,
Mm.
you and me. But what I'm seeing is, what I'm envisioning is at least that while we have not seen the finance departments embrace GenAI that quickly, it has actually been relatively slow compared to other what do you call it, work groups like communication or developers and so on. Finance is in the lower bottom, like 30% or
Yeah.
20% something. Maybe that's also what's reflecting on your end here. That's not the obvious use case for a chatbot. That's how that would be the initial assumption that you would be forgiven to have taken, right? But I think actually when we look at something like that in a couple of years, right, we will see um, like controlling the ability to control every single document and element and contract and transaction with an AI bot that looks at it, where no
Yeah.
human has the time to look at it. I think we're going to see so much use cases in exactly finance actually and transactions, because we can do some things where we there's so many things that we don't have an overview of today that we could get with these bots, right? So
Yeah.
do you see that? Do you see an explosion of the imagination in the next couple of years?
Absolutely. I mean, we are starting our conversations also with our big partner SAP. I mean, one of my big remits at the company is looking after our partnership with SAP, and I think there is a very clear roadmap in my mind of joining forces on that topic to like combine
Mm,
the areas of focus, if you want to call it like that. We are focused on orchestrating the complex end-to-end processes, and SAP is very focused on optimizing the individual task. And you brought up controlling. Like a controller has certain tasks they have to perform.
mm,
They look at a balance sheet or look at a P&L statement and have to drive conclusions. Awesome.
mm,
We can feed them the data that we have collected from our process of orchestration capability, so that SAP has even more data to feed their Gen AI models, so that the controller has even more data to
mm.
leverage from in the Gen AI capabilities that SAPs may be developing or we're jointly developing. So there is an enormous opportunity for us to do these things, and that's why I also said we can't even yet imagine the size of the potential, because we're still stuck in
Yeah,
our
yeah,
in
exactly.
our
But
in our
that's
today's
actually that
world.
was actually my core question, right? And you go back to that was what I wanted to ask. You go back to SAP and what you're doing in Redwood. I want to ask, does finance operational leaders have to look at this? Is this paramount for them to look at it now? Do you see burning platform?
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm falling back to generalization again. I think every new technology has upside that you want to evaluate, and I think you always have to evaluate it to develop a point of view, at least, to what extent that technology can realistically help you, and to also make it part of your plans and your roadmaps and whatever you want to do in your organization. Like as a finance leader, if you haven't really like investigated AI or developed a point of view by when you want to do something about it, you have missed out already. You should have a point of view whether or not you want to consider it, but you shouldn't have ignored it.
Mm,
And I think yes, in that sense, the answer to your question is yes. You should have a look at this.
mm. So let's just change track a little bit, Devin. So, what is, in your opinion, the most important thing right now to have a data automation or an AI strategy? Or I could also say, should companies have a CDO, a CAO, or a CAIO in the same? I could say that in the same sentence, right? So,
Yes.
what do you personally think is the most important right now for people to get together? So you have to choose one. You can't say everything, right? Because that's the easy. All of it at once. That's easy, right?
Um, I think you need first the data, and I think actually it's something even else. I think what you want to have is an idea,
Mm,
and whether that falls in your classification under AI strategy, I'm not sure. But I think the first thing you want to understand is what is the end result I want to be working towards. If you have no end result you're working towards, all the strategies are like pointless because you don't know what
mm.
you're going to be doing. But then in terms of executing, you need to start with data. You need to have clear data and unbiased data, and you have to have automated your data pipelines to the point that we previously discussed. And only then you'll be able to deliver against those ideas that you had, whatever those ideas might be. Now, the question is that an AI strategy? Because most of the time, what I hear about AI strategy is our AI strategy is ChatGPT. That's not an AI strategy.
Yes.
So the strategy, the way I would define is have a clear understanding of what use cases, what processes are you seeking to optimize or reinvent using AI as a catalyst. And if you do, only if you have a clear set of ideas and use cases, whatever you want to call them, only then you can actually deliver something meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you're echoing something I've probably said before also on the podcast, and maybe you've heard that, maybe you've seen me write it also on LinkedIn. You shouldn't
Yes.
necessarily have these AI strategies, but focus more about what is the business challenges that you're having, what do you want to achieve, and then sort of expect technology to be able to solve it to some extent right now, right?
Yeah.
So having ChatGPT is not an AI strategy. That's what you're saying.
Correct. And I think that's and as I said earlier, I think that's what I see most companies struggling with,
Why do you think they're
even
struggling with that? Why do you think they do that?
because of the imagine. You have to be have imagination,
Mm.
and not everybody has imagination. Most
Why do they do
organizations.
things then?
That's a good question. I think most organizations are iteratively improving,
Mm.
right? They're not disrupting themselves. And even with AI, even with the technology, considering an iterative improvement is not straightforward. Okay, we already have a chatbot on our website. I'm just taking that example because it was part of the discussion. We already have a chatbot on our website that handles like 60, 70, 80% of the customer inquiries. What on top of that is GenAI going to deliver?
Mm.
That's a question they ask themselves. Or what if I use GenAI in my engineering team? How much is it gonna improve the coding or the quality
But
of
it doesn't
code?
seem like people have been thinking that. People have been implementing ChatGPT, Copilot stuff. They've just been throwing it out to employees, right?
Yeah.
So they must have thought something. Is this just marketing
No, not
FOMO?
necessarily. Not necessarily. I think my observation or my conclusion so far in my career is if you don't have a clear idea, the results won't be disruptive or
Mm,
huge. You might have a little bit of incremental benefit. If I give ChatGPT all my engineers, let's say, or you give it to all your engineers, you will have incremental value. But is it going to be like the major thing is going to blow something off the roof? Probably not. They won't come up with the next whatever cloud platform just because you gave them ChatGPT.
but
But
that's
it's
always that's always the discussion. Also for an automation platform like you and Redwood, and for
yeah,
RPA and for everything else, right? So, and I think Kurt Cagle actually put the nail on its head. How do you say? He's hit the nail on its
you
hammer.
need the nail on his
Yeah,
head. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Where he said he wrote a post that made me think a lot, saying that autonomous. cars, he doesn't really believe they're going to make a big difference because you still have to sit in the car, right? So, so
Yeah.
if you're already sitting there, why not just have a lot of assistance? Why does it have to be driving you on its own, right? So the same with automation, right? If you're just automating things and you say, "Oh, I saved so much hour because I know how much time it takes to produce this one document," right? But if people are then sitting waiting for the automations to finish, are we even improving anything, Devin?
Oh, that's a very philosophical question. I think we
Yeah, that's
do.
okay. Are
I
we
think
just
we
are we
do.
just are we just estranging people from what's actually going on?
No, I do think we're improving, but sometimes the improvement gets lost in all the other stuff that we're also doing. And
Mm,
you lose sight of it because you're doing 50 things at the time. So I think it's necessary to sometimes like measure the impact of your ideas, what you actually did, but also step back and take a broader view and ask the question, what did you actually achieve? And did it really make an impact? And that's where data is important because you also want to measure the impact of whatever you do in terms of uh, improvements or additions to your company. Like even if,
mm.
like in our case, if I couldn't prove to our customers that we can automate their close in 5 days rather than 10 days, they wouldn't be interested. So you want to be able to quantify the impact that you're having, and that's the same applies everywhere.
But it also, like, if you have a conveyor belt and people are waiting for things to come down the conveyor belt, no one is taking responsibility for the entire conveyor belt process, right? They're just waiting for things to come down their specific
Yeah.
conveyor belt slide, right? And that's also the issue all the time with automation. There's an estrangement to that, right? And what's the golden rule, Devin? What should you automate? What shouldn't you automate? Oh, I'm pushing you here. I know that.
No, I think it's a valid question, Lasse. I mean, and I'm having those are the conversations I'm having with our customers too, and actually those are the ones I enjoy
Mm,
because I think, and actually you and I spoke about this in one of our earlier conversations. I think if you and going back to the CDO, CAIO, and the likes of roles, I do think that we have to evolve being product management driven organizations, and basically every business outcome that you're driving is a product,
mm,
whether it's closing the books, whether it's running a supply chain, whether it's I don't know, transportation. These are services that you actually deliver as an organization end to end, which span across God knows how many departments. And you will have to have people that own the outcomes that are associated with running these processes. And many organizations do that already, not consistently, but they do that. And those are also the teams or the individuals that should have the mandate to explore new technologies and to leverage technologies to continue to improve whatever this process is doing. And in the finance example, I've seen that a lot. Also in supply chain, I've seen it a lot, but not everywhere, and not every organization is doing it. Thinking of the end-to-end process as a service to their own organization or as a service to
mm.
their end customers. And I think that mindset is absolutely critical. If you don't think as an end-to-end service, that's when you miss out on the opportunity where you don't develop ideas because you're too fragmented. If I only look at 10 tasks out of 2000, how am I going to do
Yeah, but
meaningful change to that?
Borhan in the 26th episode, he no 27th, he said that that was this Dutch traffic scientist back in the 70s who talked about the best traffic, the most safe traffic is where we remove all of the bike lanes and all of the traffic signs and everything, because then people have to take ownership for traffic and actually be cautious all the time at all times, right? but
Yeah.
but that's also why when you put in an automation into something, you're making a systemic, red, yellow, green sign. So you're not
Yeah.
telling people to reflect necessarily themselves. That's what I was asking. That's the big philosophical question. What's the golden rule? Well, when should people think for themselves? And what shouldn't we automate?
That's a very tough question. I think this is very much governed by law today.
Mm,
Because in principle there is a lot you could everything that is basically a rule-based decision or based on pattern matching, if you will,
mm,
can be automated today. And the only reason where you shouldn't be automating it because it is when it has maybe significant implications
Oh
on
yeah, but now we can
legals and
also
stuff,
automate.
right?
You can also automate the screening of teenagers with GenAI for being depressions or for depressions. You've seen
Yeah.
those things as well, right?
Yeah, but
Do we
that's
want to
that's the
do that?
morale that's the morale obligation we have. Like, I think it's much more about morale and values that we don't want to breach rather than technical capability, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think just that's where we are unlocking or coming to a discussion that could be fun to have, right? Or we should have, because we can do so many things today, right? Like automating our whole interaction with all of our clients. But the
But we're not
clients are
even
the
doing
lifeblood
that
of the
yet.
company. Yeah, but like clients are lifeblood of a company, right? For most
Yeah.
companies. And if we just automate that, do we have a company tomorrow, or is that what we want to do? Is that the fun part? And but being able to do everything means that we have to talk about what do we want to do, and
Yeah.
that was perhaps the essence of what I was asking you.
Okay,
And I know
I
it's
think that
difficult
makes
one to an
sense.
automation CTO, right? But
No, no, no. I think here's my personal view on it. I don't
yeah,
know who else shares that point of view, but I think in my personal, and COVID, by the way, COVID was a big catalyst for me developing
yeah,
this point of view. I think automation should empower us to be real humans. And what I mean by that is that and I want to talk about this anecdote, if you will. Over the COVID period, I had to isolate myself a lot from because of the COVID situation from my family and from my parents and from friends and coworkers. And I realized that the actual human to human interaction is so valuable and it gives you so much energy, right, as you do that. Or the opposite, the absence of it makes you sick and makes you depressed or whatever. So I always think of automation in any of its shapes as something that should empower us to spend all of our time being humans with each other
mm,
and making the most impact of it. Like, if I can have my call center agents have really quality time with my customers, not to be like distracted with a lot of shit that they have to take care of, I would optimize for that, because there is inherent, the maximum value is in the human to human interaction. And if that's part of what you're doing, I would always optimize to give that the most room, if you will, in everything that you want to deliver, whether it's in the personal context or in the professional context. So, and that's why I'm always coming back to, hey, you haven't even automated all the other crap. Like,
mm,
why are you talking about these morale things? There is like, you still have 5,000 people in your shared service center that do stupid stuff that prevents them from having meaningful human interactions with each other and your customers, but you're still having this morale debate with me whether or not it's okay to do whatever XYZ with GenAI. Why don't you do the other stuff first?
mm.
And I think that's my very personal take on it, where I'm maybe that's unnerving. Here you go. Um, that I think sometimes we're losing, because there is so much you could do. It's, to your point, it's hard to make priorities. What should we be doing, or what shouldn't we be doing? But for me personally, I think that's kind of what I would index on.
But that's a brilliant perspective on it, and I completely agree. And that's also why I think the allure of a chatbot to speak to everyone and is dangerous to some extent, right? Because it you just put that in and start talking to your clients, and are you even everything becomes something. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but there's something human experience stuff getting lost here, right? It
Yeah.
becomes like this AI boyfriend girlfriend thing. I saw posters for that in Japan when I was in Japan, right? There was this runway girlfriend boyfriend big posters in Osaka. I was like, what? So I posted that. It is happening, and I don't think everyone understood. People just understood. Oh, he's been to Japan, nice. But I actually meant, wow, this is actually coming now. People don't even want to, have uh, the magic of all the terrible stuff of being in a relationship.
Yeah, look, I think the reason I made the point that this is a very personal experience, because it was, I had this aha moment. And if you don't have that aha moment and you don't come to the realization that the quality of a human interaction is just different than the quality of a digital
Mm,
interaction with whatever, even if it's an interaction with a human that is on the other side of a chat, the quality of the interaction is just different. It's not even close. And I came to that realization because of that COVID experience. And maybe I wasn't consciously taking notice of it
mm,
before. And without that acknowledgement, without that realization, I wouldn't have the point of view that I have now. And a lot of people have, like, especially younger generations that grew up in this digital world, they don't even see or feel a difference necessarily. So it's, in
Mm,
this case, this is a very personal, hence a personal point of view of mine. And I don't know if everybody would share that point of view, on whether or not it's that much of a difference. But for me, definitely it is. It is like that.
yeah, yeah. I agree, and I think but I think also there's something simplifying who we are and how we think and everything. I didn't like what I didn't like in COVID was the way you had to have an online meeting to talk to anyone, so you had to have a reason to have a chat, right? And
Yeah.
of course, I'm a very I some would say I talk a lot.
How come?
So, evil tongues will tell you Lasse is the guy who talks. But for me, I ran a team, and I realized that I kept speaking to one of them about a problem we had, and then when suddenly we were in the office, all of us again, another guy said, "Hey, I know this solution for this problem," because he just eavesdropped on it, and that kind of unstructured conversation, this just dropping into things and things happen. I think that's where some of the magic happens, right? That's where I think we become um, more than just who we are. That's how we can solve complex things, right? Because we make each other bigger than our individual brains. So locking us into an automation that way, or just stopping that interaction with what is maybe inherently a flawed human interaction to some extent, not perfect brains like a perfect system could be, but I think that's where something beautiful happens as well, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, I can only agree.
I think Günter Grass is one of my favorite quotes. You're German, so I know you live in Germany, right?
Yeah,
I don't
yes,
know if
that's true.
you're right, but he wrote this poem about his old Olivetti typewriter, where he says, "My alte Olivetti ist Zeuge, wie fleißig ich lüge und von Fassung zu Fassung die Wahrheit ein Tippfehler näher bin." And you see, I know it by heart, but what he's actually saying is that my old typewriter is witness to how often I lie, and from each edition to edition the truth is one typo closer.
Yes.
And that's why I think the fallible, the fallibility of humanity is also what brings us closer to something that has value. And I think that's maybe my philosophy to
No,
some extent.
I like it.
Yeah, mm, I'll get that tattooed. Anyway, but okay, so let's just get back to the topic of AI again, because I want to. There's this touch of in the market as well. If I'll believe it when I see it. That means that we're so fascinated with LLMs, right? Because there's so many technologies out there that could actually have given us these big aha moments. And I'm not talking about the Norwegian band aha, but the real aha moments, right? So, but this thing that we can actually see when we chat with this. So we start chatting with an LLM, then it's like, whoa, it's answering me back. This is really new technology, right? Um, but are we oversimplifying something that's much more complex by just seeing it as this chatbot, or is this really a C3PO moment? How do you feel about this, Devin?
Yes, I think we touched on this before. I think I think we underestimate it and we overestimate it as well, because we don't know yet. Our imagination is not where it could be, and probably it's going to evolve over the next years and decades. I think calling it a chatbot is too limiting, but having it solve world hunger is probably the false expectation. Um, and yeah, I think we'll find out, and it's um,
But some of those things that you would expect a human to understand and they don't understand. Like
yeah.
one of my favorite examples is I have a boat with room for a person and an animal, and make an optimal plan for taking me and my dog Luna across the river, and it interprets it as
Mhm.
a riddle. So it makes it then the answer is always something like sail Luna across, then go back, then sail yourself across, then go back, and then the boat goes back. It's like, what are you doing? And it's completely nonsense, right? So there's this nonsensical things to it
Yeah.
as well, right? So are we being? That's why I'm saying, are we oversimplifying things? Or are we looking at something? Are we seeing Jesus in a biscuit here?
Well, I think, and you may, I think this point was made by you earlier today, but also in one of the other podcasts
Yes.
episodes of yours. I think, um, if you understand its limitations, you're much more likely to use it at its best in terms of what GenAI is capable. So if you're aware of its biases, of its shortcomings, of the what is it called? Hallucination, hallucinations,
Hallucinations,
hallucinations.
hallucinations.
God, different world, a difficult word. If you're aware of those
Different
things, I
world.
think
Like you're in some
um,
other world, Devin. Oh no, wrong world. Different world.
uh, so I think if you're aware and conscious of its limitations, then you're more likely to use it in a more optimal way, and you
Mm,
don't have outrageous expectations that it will never meet. And those capabilities will change and evolve over time, but at least you're not overhyping it, if you will. So and that's why technical folks are using it, are more satisfied, I would say, with what they get out of Gen AI, because they know it's kind of statistics, and it's basically very
yeah.
complex recommendation models, and they don't have false expectations from it in that regard.
No, no, but that's also why some of the problems, right? In Denmark there was this proposal, I think, from the government to save 10,000 jobs by using Gen AI, right, or the LLMs, and then we're a smaller country, like 6 million people in Denmark, so that's quite a lot of people actually, and I just think sometimes people are being naive and overlooking some other trends that could affect them more or will
Mm.
affect them more. And do you agree with that? Are we barking up the wrong tree sometimes with all this focus on LLMs? Now I've had you and guilty as charged. I have you on a podcast, and I'm just talking about LLMs, right?
Yes.
But are we barking up the wrong tree here?
This I will answer with a philosophical answer. I think in my God knows almost 20 years in the business. That's a long time, by the way. Um, I think it's very human to want to solve very complex things with an easy answer. We see that everywhere, whether it's in
Mm,
politics, in economy, in
yeah.
science, in like in IT. We're always looking for the next thing that's going to solve the biggest problem for us, but that doesn't exist.
Mm,
And I think that's why every time that you come up with something, there is a huge hype about, because everybody believes now this is the one thing that's going to remove all my problems, and it's going to be perfect, and I don't even have to work hard for it, which is always wrong, of course. And like if you remember 5 years ago, 6 years ago, so RPA, oh, everything will be automated, don't have to do any single boring task anymore. I don't think that happened. Now it's the LLMs. So there is an unnatural hyper expectation and in what these new technologies can bring, and sometimes that distracts us from doing maybe the unsexy, boring but necessary things to actually achieve improvement,
mm,
because these are just, it involves grinding. It involves doing things that we don't enjoy doing, but actually that would drive much more progress than like jumping on the next shiny thing that is out there. And I don't want to disrespect or disregard the Gen AI or LLM capabilities. That's not the point. I'm just trying to make the point that we as humans, we're always tempted to be hyped up because we want to be hyped up. We want to go for the thing that is going to solve probably the biggest bang for the buck with the least effort. And but that's
mm.
kind of, I think, a false image we're sometimes creating for ourselves, which then like gets us on the wrong path at times, or distracts us from the actual stuff that would move the needle.
I think, well, you said those. I just, my mind went into a weird analogy. Actually, it made a flip to love, right? And funny you said sexy thing because that was a, but it's like we, but it's like we fall in love with technology, right? Just like you believe that this one person will solve all my issues, right? I'm so in love with you, right? That feeling of
Yeah.
overage joy, right? You will solve everything. I'll never have a problem. This is just wonderful. I love being with you, and everything's perfect, right? Then 5 years later, it's like, oh, so many things to fix, right? Oh, this is tough, right? Maybe I should just. Oh, I need to get out of this and find the next new stuff, right? Oh, now it's good again, right? But the funny thing is that this is what I've read some books about this as well, right? You always meet yourself. No matter if you get out and get into a new relationship, you end up meeting yourself again.
Mm.
You look for the same patterns of someone who will at one time free you from the things that trouble you, but also what do you call that? expose you to the things that trouble you. You know, they have the both sides in them. Everyone you fall in love with, and they're always just on the same dimension, right? To some extent. So you meet yourself all the time, and that's maybe the thing here that enterprise is looking to fall in love with a new technology. They can do that, but then they'll, 1 year down the line, they'll meet themselves again and say, "Whoa, our data is crap. Our legacy system doesn't work." And that's meeting themselves and their challenges, and then they have to start to figure out: do we want to work on our challenges, or do we want to just go find a new tech and say, "Whoa, this is." It's actually an okay analogy, isn't it?
I mean, it's funny that you said it. When you started talking about the relationship, I immediately thought about washing the dishes and like hoovering the house. And nobody thinks about these things when you're starting a
No,
relationship, when you're kind of
no.
in love. Like, but that's eventually what your life turns into once you're married and so forth. Like, okay, who cleans the house? Who makes the
Yeah,
dishes? Like, who washes? Who makes like all that stuff? So I think those things are not as exciting, but they're actually much more relevant at some point. But you also want to have the exciting part at the beginning. Ideally, you have both, right? If you have
yeah,
made the right
yeah,
choices. But when you're in it, when you're in like most organizations are, they have been doing their things for like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years. There is a certain routine that is dragging you down, and you
mhm,
have to find the energy and the awareness to pick your right battles who will actually move the needle for you. And as again, it's a lot of what we're discussing is actually human philosophy and human psychology. It's not technology
mhm.
at all.
Yeah,
I
yeah. But I
think
think that's really fun actually that we go there.
yeah,
Or
but I mean, I think we're all humans. In the end, it's us humans using technology. And one of the other podcast guests spoke about like humans and bias. It's
mm,
in our bias is reflected in everything that we do, whether it's our behaviors or our belief
yeah.
systems or yeah,
Exactly. Now, and to some extent, that's also what AI is. It's just reinforcing our own biases. A lot of people are saying,
yeah,
"I don't. Oh, it doesn't matter that the AI is biased because it's just reflecting our biases." Yeah, but we also try. I always say we also try to diminish those bias, right? That is
yeah.
something we actively do. So it's not an excuse that it just resembles the worst parts of who we are.
That's
But
true.
bias is also what makes it easy for us to work and do things, right? So it's both productive and unproductive. I've had that discussion often, actually, also in the podcast. The productivity of bias. That's a really interesting discussion, actually.
Yeah.
Um, but Devin, are we in a bubble, right? Or what do you think will happen the next year or two?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're always inevitably in some form of bubble, and just you just can't avoid
I'm not
it.
talking about existence as a whole,
Yeah,
Devin.
no, no. I
Different
mean,
world, different world, right? What you said before.
yeah, a different dimension. Let's go that way.
Yeah.
Uh, um, no, I think it's inevitable. I think, but if it because it's inevitable, you want to be more self-reflected and take a conscious decision to question whether you're not in a bubble and to question some of your thoughts that you're having, so that you ground yourself a little more and you at
Mm,
least, yeah, to remove some of the potential bias you might have because you are actually in a bubble without recognizing it in the first place. I think that's the first part of the answer. And I think what we'll see over the next years is both. I would think we'll see a much more practical application of AI. Like I named a couple of examples what we're going to do at Redwood with it, but we'll see more of that rolling out across organizations, and I hope to see a bunch of more innovative ideas that go
mhm.
beyond like the optimizations that we're all doing. I'm still waiting for the big thing. See, I'm also waiting. I'm
AI
also ready
girlfriend.
for the hype. Yeah, I'm
The AI
curious.
girlfriend, Devin, right? AI girlfriend. Waiting for that one.
Oh, holy, that's horrible. That's a horrible imagine. Oh.
Yeah.
No, but I genuinely believe we'll see both. It's going to be more applied, even more broadly, but we'll also see some of the really cool stuff that could move the needle significantly. I just don't know what it is. I don't have the idea yet myself, but
Mm.
I'm sure there will be other much more intelligent people who come up with that stuff.
So is this more of an investor bubble, right? You read some of that, right? That they've overinvested and can't get the return on their investments,
Yeah.
or is it really a technology bubble? That is, I think that's actually the interesting question right now. Do we have a really good technology? I think we do. I think we have a technology that's really productive. Has been overhyped, yes, and has that led to over investments in just core technology that is suddenly, super commoditizing for some weird reason. Everyone has a GPT-4 now, right? Size model. It's like
Mm.
is really fast, right? That commoditized, and so I think it's really difficult to be an investor when you're investing in the core tech, right? But are we? Is this is this really a bubble on the technology side, or is this just a bubble on the investor side? Do you think?
I need to think about this for a second. My gut feeling or my initial reaction would be it's both.
Mm,
Um, because from a tech perspective, we always want, again, to the discussion we had, we always want the next shiny thing to pop up and we get excited by it. And something similar applies to the investor community because they want to put their dollar where they get back $10. So
mm,
they're equally tempted to fall for hype in that regard. And the FOMO is very everywhere. Like again, human
yeah.
psychology. So I think it's universally applicable. Um, but you made another point that I find very interesting, and I had not thought about it before, is the commoditization of it. Ultimately, there are a few players that are the ultimate beneficiaries of what we're doing with Gen AI, and
Mm,
Nvidia is one of them, like Microsoft or OpenAI is one of them. So
yeah.
they are defining the platforms and the hardwares of those platforms of the future, and they have made the right long term choices in that. And I think that's gonna what we'll see to turn out is a little bit of a consolidation also in terms of tech stacks and platforms that are going to be used for
Well, they
AI.
have the same API interface, almost all of them, right? And
Yeah.
they are all GPT-4 size now. Even open source models are getting there. You know, it looks very commoditized, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And the question is where does your actual IP then come from?
Mm,
Like if everybody has access to Gen AI,
yeah.
OpenAI and ChatGPT, what makes your thing that you built on top of it or next to it, what does make it hard to replicate? And why is there sustainable value in that business, which is then turning into that turns the technical problem into the investor problem. Can I trust this value proposition to live longer than 2 years, or will it fall apart because some smart guy can figure out the same thing in 6 months? And I think that's kind of, I don't have the answer to that. I haven't even thought
No.
about it yet, but I think that's the questions that are in many people's minds.
But it's funny, right? It's funny with the FOMO because if you just zoom out really big, right, and we say we've now invented technology that can that can help us make smarter decisions. We've been doing that for years, right, for decades. Also, what Laurie and Pratt said, we have so much data and we have so much compute power that we can make smart decisions, but we're still making gut feeling decisions, right?
We're
So
humans.
so we're talking about AI, super advanced AI that should be able to help us make the right decisions, and we're still making FOMO rash decisions to to spur on that same AI, right? But there I don't know, there is some irony to it, aren't there?
I, I I think I had this conversation with my wife just yesterday, where I was just debating
Oh,
how we were debating how we make decisions. Ultimately, we all make decisions based on our emotions, and then we try to find the data and the facts to give evidence
yeah.
that our decision was right. We all do that. So, um, yeah.
But enterprises we could do, it's like, oh, no one predicted COVID, but maybe we could have, right, guys? Maybe we could just looked at human history, seen pandemics happen. Get my point?
Yeah, I don't have a point of view on that one. That's a difficult one. But there are patterns in everything. The question is, do you
Mm,
look for them, or is something looking for them? And yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, but Devin, are you sure Redwood is on the right side of history? I think that is part of your responsibility, right?
correct. Yes, I think it is first, but it's also the question of the time frame you're looking at. Like I don't know yet what the world is going to look like in 10 years from now. No idea.
Mm,
But for the next few years, I'm very comfortable. Let's say because of um, where we stand and what we actually do for our customers. And I mentioned those very complex processes in the
yeah,
example. So that is something that AI cannot and will not do. And it's also not the focus of any of those technologies at this point of time. And I rather see us augmenting and complementing it. Actually, so something I'm going to take the example when SAP came up with the HANA in memory databases, something very similar happened there. People asked, hey, doesn't that make your technology obsolete? No, it doesn't, because we orchestrate complex processes, all of the individual transactions that are involved maybe get smarter or faster, But because we're a layer on top of everything, we augment what these processes are doing. And I give the same answer to customers now years later when they ask about Gen AI, because okay, if raising a single purchase order is getting better now in your ERP system, but it's just one of 2,000 steps in your planning process.
But
I'm
you are just underscoring and underpinning what I've been saying so many times. You know that easier to do things just adds to more complex demands, right? And demand is just a fractal; it just moves up. It's just more to orchestrate.
Yeah. So that's why I'm not worried, and we're to your point, where I think we're on the right side of history. But you have to stay grounded and humble, and don't take things for granted. Well, my CEO always comes up with the like Warren Buffett's ABC that make great companies fail: arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. ABC. So stay
Mm.
away from those. Don't take everything for granted, and then I think you can be a healthy organization.
That's a great note to go to the final question, Devin. So I hope you're ready for that. The centerpiece of in the end of the podcast, right? And I
Yes.
know you're prepared for this one. So
I hope you can never be prepared, but
maybe you had ChatGPT prepared. Let's start reading all out. Let's delve into. Oh no, stop, Devin. No, great. So, Devin, what is the only constant?
I think for me, the only constant is what I call the formula to success or the formula to progress. And that is the fact that you have to stay curious, stay self reflected, stay adaptable, and then be very determined and um, willing to work hard to the outcome. And if you look at human history and any innovation, anything that was meaningful to a business, to mankind, to any society, it involved these key aspects of how we actually evolved from and succeeded in driving change and driving improvements. It was these attributes of people or groups, and it doesn't matter how technologically we'll evolve. We've been discussing at length today that it's all, in the end, we're humans, and it's human psychology that is the limiting factor, if you will, or human nature. And you need these things and these traits to actually succeed, and that won't change. Nothing will remove that for the foreseeable future, in my opinion.
That's a great answer, Devin. So, curiosity and determination, adaptability.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Thank you for that, and thank you for a great answer. And thank you for being a guest on The Only Constant today. It's been a real pleasure to have you here, Devin.
Thank you, Lasse, for having me. As always, it's fantastic to talk to you. I enjoy every single one of our conversations. Thanks for having me.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.